back to I Remember That podcast with Kris and Ian. Today we have a very special topic. We want to break down the war, not World War II, not even Vietnam, the war between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Which game system did you have? Which game system did you love? Were you a Sonic fan, or did you think Mario took the crown? We're going to break it down, and we're going to talk about the history, the games we remember, and the overall culture between the two companies. As always, I would love to hear you say, hey, Ian.
Hey, Ian.
You changed it. It's evolving. I love it.
Just a little bit. We're growing.
Right. So what system did you have first?
Ooh, I don't know which one I had first. I think I got a Sega first. Like I got a. Let's see. I had a regular Nintendo, but since this is Sega versus Super Nintendo, and
I did start with an NES too, and I think that's important to say to kind of show our age, because we were like, it was like a hand-me-down system like that. Clearly came out in the 80s, but by the time our parents, it was kind of cheap enough. You remember when you could get a Nintendo or a GameCube for like $50 at Walmart? That was probably right when we were born, and so they've
a GameCube.
Yes, dude. There are pictures of like Walmart nostalgia TikToks, and it's like it's a sign at Walmart and it says GameCube $50, and I'm just like, man, it was probably right at the tail end. But so we started with NES, me and Ian. It sounds like I can remember like it was yesterday. My great grandfather handed me that little square controller, and it was Mario. I think it's the first one, the Mario Duck Hunt crossover thing everybody had with the laser or the zapper. And I can remember just running into the pit every time, and I was laughing and having so much fun. And my grandpa was so frustrated, and he was just like, "Jump, hit the button, jump!" And I was just like, and like Mario died. I can remember that vividly, but I think that kind of sealed the deal that I was a gamer, from that point onward. But as for the generation we're talking about, my grandma had a Sega Genesis. And I think about this all the time. I'm like, what possessed her to buy the system? And then also, who gave her such good taste in picking out games? Because, there was like 7 or 8 games. Sonic 2 was there, a couple of the, other staples. And I just am like, did my grandma go over there and just be like, you know what, I'm going to be a gamer. I'm going to try it. And then kind of handed it off to me, or was I born and she knew that I liked it enough to get one? I have no clue, but it's so funny that that's how video games were introduced to me. Do you remember who got you the Sega, or like was it just there when you gained sentience, or what? What's the word? Your mental.
I don't know. I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe. It's. I got it. I don't remember getting my Sega. I did get the Sega before we had the Super Nintendo, and it was for my birthday, I think, when I was like maybe 6. And well, no, honestly, it's probably before that, because the N64 came out when we were like 6, and I got that pretty early, I think, too. So I probably had my Sega for a while, but it was like mine. And I played Sonic like crazy, of course, like everyone did. But one thing that I remember more than anything is the one that my Sega came with was Sonic and Knuckles.
Yes,
and
the one that Knuckles, you stack the game. You could stack the other Sonic game into it.
Oh, I don't know about that. Maybe.
Okay, Sonic and Knuckles had this like special cartridge that you could flip it. There was a lid on top, and you flipped it open, and it was another set of like teeth to put another game inside. And then if you put Sonic 2 on top of it, you could play Sonic 2 as Knuckles.
What?
Yeah, it blew my mind. That's what I'm saying, man. My grandma picked all that out. I'm like, how did she know?
Dude, I don't think I had that one, because that sounds wild.
Yeah, it may be a different name of a Sonic game, but I remember, I'm pretty sure it was Sonic and Knuckles, because you could pick between the two, Sonic or Knuckles, and the levels were different vaguely depending on who you picked. And like Knuckles could fly and attach himself to the side of walls and stuff, and it was. Yeah, I hate to say it, but it was ahead of its time in a way.
Yeah, no. So I maybe we did have that type of cartridge, because I remember it being Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and there were 2 games. I don't remember it being a cartridge like that, but maybe it was, and I just don't remember that. That's wild, though, because I looked it up. I Googled it just now, and that's exactly like I don't recall that, but that's super ahead of its time. You're right, dude. I've never heard of that.
You could stack other games on top and it would do weird stuff, and I can't remember exactly because it's probably been 15 years since I did that, but yeah, it was really unique. And I'm trying to think when I got a Super Nintendo, because it was just as big in my life. Oh, my mamaw had one, so my granny had the Sega Genesis, and then my mamaw had the Super Nintendo, and we would go to Mr. K's. Not McKay's, because that's too far. We'd go to Mr. K's in Oak Ridge, and back then, those games were like $1. So, she was,
damn.
I was a hyper kid, so she's like, listen, I'm exhausted. Just let me buy 1 book, and I'll get you a game. And, after a year of that, you've built up like 10, 20 games. The biggest difference in the 2 systems to me, other than subtle gameplay differences, obviously the music was different, and I looked it up to see what the differences were, and like Sega sounds were based on synthesis, so it was like a synthesizer in the cartridge, or not cartridge but system, that it was real sounds. And then I believe Super Nintendo kind of emulated sound. So it meant that snares and drum sounds in the Sega was made on a synth. So it was gritty, more bassy, like a saw wave. But then the Super Nintendo, it was more samples, I think. And it was so it was clear, but it took up more space on the CPU power, all that. I don't know. I'm getting past my technical jargon here, but I always thought that was cool. And I think that the Sega has better sound because it's more musical. But then you've got Donkey Kong soundtrack that blows what I just said out of the water. So, but they did unique things to make that sound so good. There's a video on it, and it goes way over my head, but the orchestrator of the music just really understood the SNES's capability to be able to fit all that onto a cartridge. Did you have a favorite song? Like, there's so much music on those games. It's like playlist worth.
I don't recall having like a favorite. I mean, the one that's stuck in my head, like while we're talking, is a Sonic level. I don't know which one it is. I think it's like I think it's Sonic or Sonic 2, and it's like maybe like that has a factory or something like that, like a futuristic type metal-ish robotic level, and there's like a song that's playing in my head from that, and I think that's what's stuck in my head right now.
I wonder if it's Casino Nights. That's the second level.
Dude, it might be Casino Nights.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's super catchy. It's a little bit, it's retro, but I guess the time it wasn't. But it was very cool, very catchy, stuck in my head. But speaking of, you brought up Donkey Kong, and I was while you were talking, I was thinking in my head about, there's a correlation in terms of the music with Donkey Kong, Sonic, and Mario, and it's the music in the water levels. And the water level music in all the old games is insane.
Yeah, it's like there's a different class. They're like, oh, water? Well, bring in the Steve Vai.
Dude,
bring in the masters of music.
Yeah, the Donkey Kong water levels were like this beautiful music, it was so flowy and amazing. But then the Mario ones, the Mario music level, it was different in the sense of it was a little bit more
Super
positive.
Mario World had, like on Super Nintendo, had pretty decent water level music.
Yeah, well, and really the Super Mario Bros. 3, they both have interesting water level music that's different from the normal style. Like the normal style from the levels is like jumpier, which I guess it's actually interesting to say that, because I say jumpy, but I mean then it goes to water, and it feels like more swimmy. Like there's something about the way they made the music that met the actions you were doing. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like a
but
scary
Sonic,
movie without the. It's less intense if the music isn't as like staccato or whatever.
right?
It does paint. Because you only have so much room on those cartridges to convey your story, and I think music or sound effects. Every time Mario jumps, the boing boing, like that could easily be annoying, but they took so much care to make those sounds kind of hook you in.
Yeah.
Like Super Mario World, when you turn that on, it's like straight up ASMR. Like I hear any sound, like getting a coin on Super Mario World, or the football player clapping his hands and jumping up, and the bah, bah, like those sound effects are. It's like just putting on a warm blanket or something. It's just, I don't know, but music and sound is powerful there for this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, and I guess you could say it's the reverse. It is effective, but I mean, you know how, like you were saying, it's like it's ASMR, it's positive, it has a warm feeling. But then, similarly in water music, dude, Sonic, because in the Super Nintendo games, they don't have like these monkeys and plumbers can breathe underwater. It didn't matter.
Right.
But Sonic,
I'm so happy you're bringing that up, because I was thinking it in the back of my mind. The
once
tenseness.
Sonic. Yeah, once you get to that like 10-second countdown of Sonic about to drown, dude, it's the scariest feeling in the world.
I think I turned up. When I get frustrated, I would just turn it off, and that every single time you try to hit those bubbles, and he would hiccup. He'd do that hiccup noise, and then you miss it, and oh man, you're. That's where Sega messed up. They were like, water levels, we're gonna make them stressful.
Dude, they were and I love too, it's not audio related, but there is that effect they do, because when Sonic's underwater, he jumps, but it's like a low gravity, because it's he's underwater. It's just like jumping underwater, but he doesn't swim like in the Mario games or the Donkey Kong games. He jumps, but then what's crazy is I love the effect when he jumps. He's getting to the surface level, he's getting into the air, and as he's jumping out of the water, he speeds up, like the gravity returns to normal mid jump.
Yeah, and it's thought
so great.
Of all that. Like a game engine doesn't just know. You have to set the speed in like a program, and it's just like the feeling and the response of a character is so important. And if like one decimal point would have been too fast, or Mario jumped a little too high, or whatever, it would have not been the same. And yeah, that's very true. Like the care that they took into the little minute details.
Mm-hmm. And that's what makes those games, the ones we're talking about, Mario and Sonic a little bit more than Donkey Kong maybe, but it's just those games just stand the test of time, even though Sonic never, because Sega, they went out of business or whatever happened, and then, Nintendo took over the rights to Sonic. But those games, like I still play the Sonic games, like the original Sega games. Like I still play those. They're iconic, timeless games. And I even played Super Mario World 2 days ago, like the whole game.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
I re-go through it every few years.
Dude, honestly, the Super Mario World and Super Mario Bros. 3 are my comfort games, I think, because when I'm bored sometimes and I don't know what game I want to play or what I want to do, I will get on the Nintendo Switch throwback, whatever portal, whatever you call it, and I'll just put on Super Mario World and I'll just play from beginning to end. Like, because do you ever think about that when you were a kid, and maybe it was everyone else and not just me, but when you played Super Mario World, it took like days to beat that game because you die so many times. There's so many, not worlds in that one, but dude, now when I play Super Mario World, I can beat it in like an hour.
Well, if you think about it, by now we've probably played it a million times. So
yeah, like I know what's coming up and stuff.
Yeah, and then for the longest time when I was a kid, I didn't know about the secret star room, so that was a new challenge to get all that stuff figured out. And then like the little secret passageways for the 1-ups and the keys and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
did you in Forest, I don't remember the name of the level exactly. It's like Forest something. Have you ever done the thing where you can get like 15 lives in with 1 star?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it. I don't think I've done it myself, but there's all kinds of stuff like that. And it's funny. My brother was here in town, just literally left a couple hours ago, and we were talking about how all that stuff was like word of mouth, all the secrets, and like it literally came from the developer himself, and then it was like a chain reaction across the country. like like unless you're just like sitting there for hours and hours and hours, which we were as kids, to figure that stuff out, it literally had to come from, maybe a Game Informer magazine, or they used to have the 1-800s you could call in and ask for game tips. Sure, that stuff. But a lot of the times that secret stuff was coming straight from the developer. And it was just like storytelling all the way across. And like then, there would always be like fake things like, oh, what's a good example? I can't think of anything. But they would just be like, oh, you can do this. You can jump. Mario can jump over the flag if you do it just right. And like you could never do it no matter what. I guess kids have it lucky now. They can just get on YouTube and look up anything, just like that. But I think that was part of the fun, was the stories that people would make up, and it was just like, oh, this game, I remember my buddy telling me about this.
Yeah, well, there was one that you got me thinking of in terms of there's the levels where you could jump over the flag per se, where in Super Mario World, there's the what is that thing even really, like that bar that goes up and down at the end where you get points if you hit it, whatever that thing's even called. I've never even thought about it. Is
I guess I haven't either.
When in Super Mario, the original game, where there was the flag like you're talking about, you jump up, you hit the flagpole, get the most points, whatever, one up, slide down. But in Super Mario World, there were those few levels, very few, but there was the one specifically where if you have, I think you have to have Yoshi, and you get I think it's the purple turtle, the purple Koopa, and you eat it, and so just above you on a platform is the final barrier. But if you have Yoshi and you get the purple turtle, you can suck it in and fly farther away, that's like super far out of the way, and then eventually get to a different portal that does open. I think it's then open to the star room maybe. But that was one of my favorite ones because it's like you said, it's going past the end that you have to know about it, and you have to see the right block in order to kind of get yourself to that position. And it also has me thinking of, like we were talking about swimming mechanics earlier and swimming levels. Dude, flying mechanics are so different between games too, that, dude, some of them piss me off too. Like I hate flying in Super Mario World, where you have to like control the wind beneath your cape and you're like bouncing in the air.
And you watch
people, hate it.
You watch these like speedrunners that they are just like zoop, zoop, zoop through the whole level, and I'm like, it's either straight up in the air or straight down for me. I to this day, I've never figured out how to do that down and up and down and up. I do not understand it.
Me neither. My sister's so good at it, and it's like you go in, and I'm the same way, where you go in and you do it the right. We probably were doing it the wrong way, but if you do it that one way, you come slamming to the earth
every time. And except for me,
so
and I go down into the pit every time. Right. That reminds me. So my wife she's a legend at Donkey Kong Country, and I was like, yeah, right. You don't like video games as much as me, and she made me a believer. Like, she knows every little secret. She could beat that game in like an hour. Like, it is insane, and it's all memorization, and like she just knows where all the little secrets are, and it's like, that is so impressive. I love it. But yeah, because we just, now kids probably got 15, 16, 20 games. We maybe had like 7 or 8, and those were the games, so you just beat the pants off of them.
I played the first and second one a lot. The second one, I think in a way I like the second one more because do what?
They get so much, the difficulty curve just ramps so fast between 2 and 3, 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something, I like the second one because you get, I think it's Dixie, who she has the flying pigtails. And so you can do that. And there was something I really liked. I mean, I guess I do love the ability to fly if that is available to me. And especially in Donkey Kong, where, well, I guess Donkey Kong and Sonic are similar in that way. Like, if you have Knuckles, you can glide. If you have Trixie or Dixie, whichever one she is, you can fly. But in Mario, you have to get the right box with the right power up. So I do love the ability to just constantly fly if you want to. And so I think I like the second one. Do what?
Well, I won't say it makes it easier. That game is so hard.
It is. I don't know that I beat the second one before, but I do.
Yeah.
There's something about it, like, you can make levels easier to a degree with the flying, you know?
True. And that's how Knuckles was, because he could glide. So maybe they, and Tails for that matter. Tails could fly.
Yeah, Tails. Oh, I love Tails.
Me too. And I think he or she, I don't remember, they follow you around in the second one. Yeah.
Real quick, do you know what Tails' real name is?
I'm not sure.
Okay, first name Miles, last name Prower, like Prowler without the L, right?
Okay.
Say it fast. Miles Prower.
Oh, that is and I remember that podcast first. You heard it here.
Yep.
Write that down.
Miles per hour. I love that so much. It's such beautiful. A cute little Easter egg. If you like it, you read it and it just comes across as just, oh, his name's Miles. That's cool, whatever. But if you say it out loud, it's like, oh, dude, Miles per hour. That's clever. I love that.
Genius, right? So let's break down these two systems technically. So the Sega Genesis, believe it or not, came out in 1989. That much power in that generation, it blows my mind. The Sega Genesis had blast processing and FM synthesis, which is what I was telling you about. With it's more of a synthesizer built into the system. And blast processing is how it was kind of like their marketing gimmick to explain how, Sonic was super fast. Like the screen would blur because he was going so fast around the loops and stuff. That was really their, like, this is better than Super Nintendo. And the Super Nintendo was released in 1991. They held on to the NES a little bit longer. I think a lot of parents were complaining, oh, we bought the NES and now we've got to buy this new one and none of the games work. What's the deal? And now that's not a big deal, but I can remember, back in the day I could see that being annoying. Super Nintendo focused on family-friendly content, while Sega Genesis was the edgier, more teen market. And then for the technical highlight of Super Nintendo, it had Mode 7 graphics, which was for 3D effects. Vector Man was Sega, sorry. A good example would be Pilot Wings, if you're familiar. Where
I love Pilot Wings so much.
Okay, so the 3D effect that has. That was the Mode 7. And all the games that use Mode 7 have a special little emblem on the cart. And a lot of people probably don't see it, but it is on there. And yeah, so I do, as far as marketing for the systems, we did grow up during those times, and I do remember Sega just being cooler. It was like, hey, you're missing out if you don't have this system. And then I can remember Super Nintendo just having more iconic characters. Link, Mario. We grew up right at the perfect time where those were household names by the time we were sentient.
You're saying sentient.
Yeah, I'm gonna make that right. I'm just gonna. If you say it enough, it'll be fine.
I hope when you edit the episode, you're gonna have you're gonna find out the real word, and you're just gonna overlay it just really horribly and crudely, where so people are not gonna know the original word you said, but it's just gonna sound so glaringly obvious.
That's the power of editing, baby. But do you remember any commercials that stood out to you? I admit, the 64 commercials were a little more in my brain, but I remember and this is a totally different battle, but the Game Gear and the Game Boy Color, or Game Boy Regular, they would always have little stabs at each other in their commercials. But I like the tagline, Sega does what Nintendo don't. Like, how
I
much
love
money
that.
did they put into those marketing campaigns? Like, they were really bitter at each other there for a while.
I'm just gonna say this. I don't remember anything before like age 8, so I don't think I remember
Yeah.
a single like I'd have like they're in their like experiences and things in my head. So obviously this podcast will continue because I have some recollection of, but like,
Oh, yeah, of course.
dude, commercials. There's something for some reason I just don't remember a single commercial for either system. It's crazy.
Like I said in the previous episode, these systems were hand-me-downs to us. Like, we weren't old enough to go to the Blockbuster and rent games for this generation. I don't think I ever rented a Super Nintendo game, like is what I'm saying. So in
No.
our mind, I think we lived through most of it before we got the systems. And we were little, obviously we were little kids. We didn't watch TV at this age, 93, because they made Super Nintendo games all the way up to 96, I think.
Dude, and see, I
And
was, but I don't even remember being 5 years old, so I probably don't remember any of that.
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so it was always intense. I remember, well, because I was gonna say Sega games were a lot grosser, but that's not true because Earthworm Jim was on
I
both
love Earthworm
systems.
Jim.
It's so good, and that kind of leads me to like there would be the same game on both systems, but they would have subtle differences. Like the Aladdin game, Earthworm Jim was a little different. Monopoly. There was like there's so many games that had little tiny differences, but were enough that it almost felt different. Like okay, I just said the Aladdin game. One was more cartoonish and more of a game, and then the other one looked more like the actual animated show itself.
Mhm.
And to me, they're both fun. But there was just those differences. Did you have a game that you noticed that? Mortal Kombat is another good one because Super Nintendo, you had to type in a cheat to get the blood. There's a blood code ABBA Abacab ABBABBC. So I don't know. I need to see it out written out. But
Yeah.
then on Sega, it was just automatic. There was blood.
Yeah, there's a thought I was having, like as you were saying all that, and then it's even better to me that you brought up the Disney games like Aladdin, because what I was kind of thinking is Nintendo kind of makes me think of like the Disney of video games, while like Sega or PlayStation might kind of make me think of
HBO.
the other studios like the DreamWorks studios or the Illumination
True.
studios, because Disney is out there, they'll make their animated movies, but they are a lot more family directed and they're not crude usually, and they have like the jokes are not adulty, like hardly ever, and the adults that get the jokes are not, they're not like sexual or anything like that. Not to say these video games are sexual necessarily, but when you're
There
looking
was
at like the
some.
Sega games, yeah, like the Nintendo games, you've got Pokemon, not necessarily for Super Nintendo, but the Pokemons and the Marios and everything, and it just feels a little bit more family friendly and so a little more clean versus the other games, the other studios, which are successful because they do what Nintendo won't do. You know what I mean?
Right. And it's like on paper, that sounds like it would hurt a company, but Nintendo is so unique. And I think it's their quality control that keeps them. Like the Switch has been out for 13 years now, and they're still pushing that thing. And they can because the games are so important. That's the only way to play those games.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that quality control kind of added to their longevity. I guess you could say Sega like threw all their cards out. Like they're like, yeah, this is for teens and this, and they didn't really build long-lasting characters. I mean, Sonic and I guess Vector Man, Toe Jam, and Earl. Nobody
Oh, I
knows
love Toe
these
Jam and
names
Earl.
really. Well, yeah, but they're no, Mario, Samus, Link, and
Right.
and I think it just has to do with that quality control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's also exclusivity of, and I not to say that Sega wasn't exclusive in their own way, like with Sonic, but again, as Nintendo grew and Sega didn't, and then Sega, Nintendo got the rights to Sonic, there is just like this exclusivity where you couldn't play Mario on anything else, you couldn't play Pokemon on anything else. And so, yeah, it is just, it grew internally and it grew in their own way, like I said, quality control. And much like Disney, they don't take on other properties. Disney doesn't take on the Grinch or Mario like the Illumination Studios might,
Right.
or like they won't take an existing property like Trolls, like DreamWorks did. They will say, okay, this is our original thing, and we will make it grow within. And maybe you get sick of the sequels and the remakes, but it is of their own things. And so they're very exclusive and very, very directed. And that's what I think. It's very similar in a lot of ways. And that's probably why they're both, like you said, long-term successful, both studios. But yeah, dude, that doesn't mean, obviously, some of these other systems, man, they've had some really iconic characters. And
Yeah, like I think that Sega kind of got away. Well, okay, and it kind of proves a little bit with it coming out in '89. Back in the day, it was all about arcades. So some of these games were hard games because rail and quarters at the arcade. They wanted you to keep trying and keep trying. So I think Sega they were like, instead of making our own little characters, we already know these games are gold mine. Let's bring these games into the home. Altered Beast, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, those kinds of games. And Nintendo, while they did that, there was definitely arcade games on the Super Nintendo, especially in the beginning. Donkey Kong was on, and the original Mario. I think Mario 1 was an arcade game.
You mean like the original, like Donkey Kong Jumpman, or like Super
the one
Mario
where
Bros?
where Mario has the hammer and it's like and it's like he's jumping over barrels.
The original one, yeah.
So that was an arcade game. So I'm just trying to. What I was saying originally is they relied on arcade game ports instead of taking the time to create original characters. Maybe that's not true. That's just my guess as to why there's not as many iconic Sega characters.
Yeah, maybe. There's so many avenues for success in the video game world. It's so interesting to see how they can grow because there's so many different types, just like movies. I don't want to keep drawing back to movies and studios, but there's so many different types of video games out there, genres where there obviously it's grown even more now, where it's like the hardest video game when you were like on Sega Genesis is probably nothing compared to the video games we have now, the intensity of like a Elden Ring or Ghost of Tsushima,
interesting.
Where it's like you could. I mean, yeah, it was probably hard. Well, then again, go back to what I was talking about before in another episode. Frickin' the Lion King video game is the hardest game of all time.
Agreed.
So I guess it depends.
That's the Elden Ring.
It's different, right? It's so different.
That's a cool way to put it because there's definitely a lot more mechanics in new games that you have to memorize and backstories and beautiful graphics and things that are way different. But I do think that there is a sense of, in the arcade, you only get 2 continues, and then you got to start the whole game over from the title screen. And it's like,
awful.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get to save any of that. An example is Echo the Dolphin on Sega, which I do want to. I have another thing I want to talk about with that. But on Echo the Dolphin, you have to echolocate. You hit the diamond that opens the door, but then if you go off screen, it didn't count. You have to go find the air, come back, and then you realize, oh, I didn't echolocate this other diamond, so now I got to go all the way back to the beginning, and you're running out of air, and it's like that is the most frustrating thing ever. For what? Like what is this game even about? Now, you've got cutscenes and things, but back then it was like 3 little words of dialogue. and there's no instructions, so they're both hard. I'll say both eras of gaming are hard for different reasons. But like speaking of Echo the Dolphin, there's nothing that tells you how to get out of that tutorial area. So the first 5 to 8 years of your life, you're just swimming around in that first little area. So you're a dolphin, Echo the Dolphin, that's what it's called. And you're a dolphin swimming around. There's another dolphin. Does not tell you who thinks in their mind, oh, dolphins can talk to other dolphins. I mean, obviously that sounds right, but not on a game. And then you finally talk to the dolphin and it says, reach for the stars. That's all it says. And you're like, what does that even mean? And apparently you can jump out of the water and do dolphin tricks. And that's mostly people's memory because that's all they did. But if you jump high enough, the Sega makes the loudest screeching noise you've ever heard. And all this planetary stuff and psychedelic imagery pulls you into space and then brings you back down, and you're like a dolphin with powers now. And it's like, as a 5-year-old kid, what are you supposed to do with this knowledge? Like games back then were very, very up to interpretation, like go your own way kind of thing.
Dude, what I think you're saying right now is actually really ageist, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I tried to play Echo for the first time like a month ago, and I couldn't figure out what to do. So it's not just 5-year-olds, brother. I had no idea what to do. Like, where were you a month ago, dude? I was like, what is this game? What am I supposed to do? And I couldn't figure it out. I just gave up.
Yeah. And like, what do you think the boss is in that thing?
I would guess a shark.
No, I don't even think there is a shark. It is an alien, a full head alien, like this huge alien.
Oh, weird.
It gets so weird. And they made Echo Jr. a kid's version, and I'm like, what? Who designed this? But that one's just one of those, like, this is the reason this era is very hard without even meaning to be hard. Ghouls and Ghosts is a good. That's the name of it. Yeah, Ghouls and Ghosts, where you have 2 hits and then you're just done, and it's just like everything can kill you, and you're just walking, and the land is moving up and down, and there's zombies coming out of the ground. You kill one, and then another one comes right up. Yeah, that stuff got so stressful.
Ghouls and Ghosts, you're right, dude. It was fun, and I love the transformation in that game, but it was. I feel like if I remember correctly, there was an element of when you attack things, it won't attack. I don't even know how to describe it. Where, like the hit, what's the thing called? Okay, when you're going to hit something in a game, and they're like the hitbox. Is that what it's called?
Hitbox. Yeah. Yeah,
the hitbox. That's like, I feel like the hitbox in Ghouls and Ghosts was insanely hard, because I feel like when I played that game, I feel like I played it recently-ish, like within the last year, and you're going all over the place trying to hit these guys, and you have to be like either mad close or you're aiming a certain way, and I feel like I remember it being hard. And so you're right. I mean, there are elements of difficulty for sure that I wasn't considering, and because there's the old games that are hard because you don't know, you just got to figure out the mechanics yourself, versus the new games where they'll tell you how to do it, but they make the bosses just stupid hard.
Yeah, or this isn't on the same system, but there's games out there that are hard just because the controls are so bad. And my number one example is Resident Evil. You'll be standing there as a character like Tomb Raider, stepping around to the left and to the right with your arms. There's one slow zombie coming at you. It takes 20 minutes to get over to you. But because you don't know how to pull out a gun or move or anything, it's just like the slowest, most antagonizing, like, I am going to die, I don't know what to do. So, yeah, games have come a long way.
Well, you know what? Okay, speaking of controls, okay, so how about this? What would you say is, of the 2 systems, which controller did you prefer?
I like the more buttons and the ergonomics of the Super Nintendo, but I liked that you could So for example, in Mortal Kombat, you had to smash those buttons like really fast
Mm-hmm.
and build up the meter to test your might, and then slam your hand down on the different materials. I felt like the Sega was a lot easier for that repeated button mash, like fast. It was a lot more fun for that, and if you had like a shoot 'em up kind of game where you could just smash the button over and over and over, I felt like it
Mm-hmm.
was a lot easier to do on Sega. But and I did enjoy the simplistic controls where you could hit two buttons and it would do something different than if you had, just the three. But they also came out with third-party Sega controllers that had, let's see, one, two, three, five buttons, and it had like the
Hmm.
turbo mode, which is stupid. I never understood it.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
somebody else used it. But it's Sega. Like I like the, like I said, the shoulder buttons ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Just
that Sega didn't have them.
Yeah, and just the sense of like you could hold down B or whatever and run faster in Mario, just like the NES. But then you could jump and then like hit the Y button and you'd spin. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that just it was revolutionary. And usually it's not Nintendo that comes out ahead on that kind of stuff. Like they just are like, oh, this is the new standard, let's do it. And I think that it still holds up. Like that's a great controller. People, they still buy that thing to play on the Wii or the Switch and stuff. So
Mm-hmm. You know, now that you say that, the shoulder buttons, it's such an interesting topic because I'd
they were
forgotten
rarely
that
used.
I forgot the Super Nintendo had them, but now thinking about it, although I'm so used to the holding B to run. Why did they not just use the shoulder button? I don't feel like it had a
Right.
purpose in those games. Why not just use R and to run and
Hmm.
not run? Like that seems so much more simple. Because, dude,
Well,
I
in
mean, like you're
racing games
saying,
too.
yeah, that's so random to think that like they had that there, but it had no use. Because like
Hmm.
having to use two parts of your thumb to play Mario seems so weird when you have an extra button on top you can use a different finger for, you know?
Yeah, did
Because like
they? I'm trying to think of a game that used the shoulder buttons, and obviously they're out there. I can't think of.
definitely the original Mario Kart. Because
Oh,
you
where you
had
could jump and grind or
yeah,
drift.
jump, drift, and items. I'm pretty sure you used the shoulder buttons for those. Um,
That's right.
which that was a fun game. That some of those. It's fun playing the Super Nintendo games too when talking about Mario Kart, because there's like Mario Kart and Star Fox where like the
Hmm.
original games are good and obviously successful enough to breed successors on the 64, but the 64 made them so much more iconic. Obviously, when you're talking about like Link, for example, you can go back and play an old Link to the Past, or you could play an old Mario game and have a good time. Mario Kart, if I want to play Mario Kart, I'm playing 64 and above. If I'm playing Star Fox, I'm playing 64. I don't want to go back and
Yeah.
play the Super Nintendo version. They were okay for the time, but they were upgraded so substantially in the next generation that they
True.
weren't. I feel like they're hardly even playable now unless you have an intense level of nostalgia. You know?
Right. And that's cool you say that about the Star Wars or Star Fox, is because I was molded in Star Fox 64. I beat that thing a million times, seen all the
Oh yeah.
secrets, everything. But then I saw some footage of Star Fox on Super Nintendo, and I thought it was like somebody had made a demake. If you're familiar
Mm-hmm.
with that, where they take a game and make it terrible or not good graphics.
Yeah.
Um, and it felt like a fever dream, and I was like, "Ugh, I don't what is this?" And so I did try it, and it is so hard, and it's just like subtly different, but it does blow my mind that they had the foresight to they got the mechanics so good on Super Nintendo that it's like the skeleton of what they did on the 64.
Yeah.
Like with the 3D, that's that Super Effects chip that I was talking about earlier. That's probably one of the biggest three like sellers of that chip was Star Fox. And
Right.
yeah, that kind of blew my mind because I'm trying to think. So on Sega, There was some 3D stuff like Vector Man, and another one that sticks out to me. You should look up the Jurassic Park game because for some reason it has some of the most beautiful 3D effects. You're in like a sidecar motorcycle and you're shooting at the T-Rex that's running at you, and you're driving towards the screen, but the dinosaur looks like full rendered dinosaur 3D, and it's like there's no way this was a Sega Genesis. Like some very impressive for the time, capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sega. I do when I think of Sega. Before we even had the conversation, I do think of Sega as the more like beautiful graphics of the systems. There's something about the that element of
When I
the
was looking it up,
flowiness and the graphics there, and there's just, it almost feels shinier. Like there's something that almost is more. It's more shiny versus the Super Nintendo being more like a matte. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm. Yeah, it says when I was looking it up, like the direct comparison that people kind of have is like SNES has smoother colors, and Genesis has overall sharper look.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be with whatever chips they used. That's probably where, if you're buying an Intel chip, they're going to buy an exclusivity where Sega's not going to be able to get the same company. So, if two companies are making something, there's going to be differences, every time. I think the Genesis had more colors that it could work with. Maybe I'm getting that backwards, but I know one had 256 and the other one had like 235 or something. Subtle difference. Now that I'm thinking, well, when we were thinking about the controllers, I was thinking about couch co-op and which was better for multiplayer games. Did you have a game that you played with like your friend or your sibling?
Yeah, well, and that's another thing I think about when it comes to Nintendo versus Sega is most of the Sega games I feel like I played individually, and
Mm-hmm.
Super Nintendo I had a lot more multiplayer memories because you were playing. I remember playing Donkey Kong with my sisters. One of us was DK, one was Diddy. You play
Yeah, that's right.
you play Super Mario Brothers. You play one of you is Mario, one's Luigi, and there's those, and it even got to the point with Mario and Luigi that it became like part of your personality that you were a
Mm-hmm.
Luigi fan because when
Right.
you were growing up, you were never allowed to be first player, so you had to be second player,
Like a
and so
complex.
you were. Yeah, there's like a younger sibling complex. Like I would not be surprised. All right, correct me if I'm wrong. Were you Mario and was your brother Luigi?
Yeah, most of the time.
Right. And I feel like your brother, I bet if you asked your brother, like, if who he prefers as a character, I bet he'd say Luigi. And I only say that because I had a similar thing in my family. My older sister was Mario because she wouldn't let me be the first player. And so I was Luigi. And I always had this second fiddle complex of, like, I wasn't allowed to be the main character. So now it literally spawned into, like, my favorite character in most, like, in anything, not just video games, in any media. It's like the main character's best friend. And I feel like it spawned from being second player
Like
when you're a
Ron,
child.
yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, no, I that makes a lot of sense. I'm For some reason I just keep thinking of Super Mario 2, which is a whole other fascinating story.
Such a weird game.
I know it, and there's a reason why Mario 2. This is NES listeners at home. Sorry, oopsies. They came out with Super Mario 2 in Japan, and it was too hard. There was poison mushrooms, and the levels were just bitterly hard. And the Nintendo of America guy, he has red hair. I don't know his name.
Okay.
He was like, "This won't do," and they were like, "Well, what can we do?" So they waited and waited, and everybody was like, "Where's Mario?" And so they took a game called Doki Doki Panic in Japan, and they said, put Mario characters over the other characters. So that's why it's completely different. There's like that egg thing. You got to throw the egg and then go in the eagle's mouth. All of that stuff, the magic carpets and going into other doors, all of that stuff in the mask makes sense for Doki Doki Panic. But in
Mm-hmm.
Mario, it's just like a cat. I won't say it was a cash grab. It was just we don't have anything ready. We don't have Super Mario 3 yet. So America needs something because it was like taking over. So that explains the weirdness there. But I always picked Princess Peach,
Oh, dude,
and
of
because
course.
she could fly, and I, I never even thought to go for Mario, and it's like, well, why would you do that? This girl flies, or this character flies, and that's just
Right.
the stuff that
There
goes
was
into that.
the only time I wasn't Peach. I think if it was two player and I would pick Luigi because Luigi had the big
Oh yeah,
like
his legs
fluttery
would go.
jump.
Yeah,
Yeah, so he had like a better type of almost a gliding jump. But yeah,
yep.
dude, I think Toad could run faster. But either way,
I
I
don't
was
remember.
never Mario.
Yeah,
But dude,
I don't
okay,
know
so
what his special was. I don't remember.
yeah, I don't remember him even having one. But I will say since you said it was an NES game. Speaking of Mario sequels and on Super Nintendo, did you ever play Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island?
It's one of my favorite games.
It's
The
so hard
graphics.
though.
Oh man, I love it. That's my Donkey Kong Country if we're relating to my wife.
Hmm.
I play it every so often. It's so creative. The graphics. I think that was another Super Effects game where the background and the foreground were different colors and they would change and things were moving in the background and it made it all pop at you. Like everything was so 3D and
Hmm.
the cute feeling of the graphics, but then also the straight up intensity of losing a baby and that little countdown
Yeah.
and the baby's crying. It's like the ultimate stress.
Yeah.
I did love that one, and that's kind of Nintendo's thing, like to here's another Super Mario World, but everything's completely different.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy. I didn't even realize, honestly, until a couple years ago, that it was a Super Mario World sequel because
Mm-hmm.
it's so different, and
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because in Super Mario World, at the very beginning, the first thing is you're at this island. You're on this island and there's a hut and you go in there and it's like, hey, what's up? We're Yoshi. Nice to meet you. This is our
Mm-hmm.
place. And it makes it seem as if like this is Yoshi's island. And then, but Yoshi is very much just like a steed and a secondary character. But then finally in the second game, you're like, oh, this is okay. It's so weird to make Yoshi the main character of a game,
It
but I
was
love it.
brave. Hmm.
Yeah.
I
It's
think that
different. I'm not
people.
used to it.
Right. It was almost like, you feel bad when you jump off Yoshi's back and he falls into or he or she falls into the pit and you survived. I think enough people did that they were like, maybe people are attached to this vehicle here and we
Hmm.
can see what kind of lore we can give. No, I'm so happy that they did that because that was a good game. It makes me think of, did you play Super Mario RPG?
No, I've always wanted to, but I've never done it.
It's very good. There's like a reason they came out with that. They saw the success of Final Fantasy, and on Sega there was what is that game called? Fantasy Star. That was their big RPG, JRPG, and Nintendo wanted one of their own, and they worked with Square Enix, which I think is who makes Final Fantasy, and they said, here, mess it up. Here's our characters. Just do your thing. And it's so unique. It's Mario to the max, like the Bowser, all of that stuff. But then it's like the Pokemon battles where it's turn based, and it works very, very well. That was a cool. I, I don't see Nintendo doing that with a lot of their IPs, but that was I
Hmm.
was I'm glad they did it. And they remade it recently or within this year. I haven't tried it, but there was enough of a response that it warranted that, so it was super creative. And I think it was a direct attack at Sega, like, hey, we can do JRPGs just as well as you without having to appeal to teen audiences or older crowds.
Right. Okay, so now you got me thinking a little bit because I know we're running short on time a little bit, and obviously this as it was destined to be. This conversation has mostly been Sonic and Mario, but because they're the icons, the mascots, it makes sense that we'd talk about them more often than the others. But since when we can do a full episode of this genre of movies. But have you seen the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, and have you seen the Super Mario Brothers movie from the last couple of years?
I haven't seen the Sonic movies. I'm a big supporter of it. I think that's so funny that an entire group of people bullied the director to make him change the the original face of the Sonic, and then it had to save that entire franchise. I love the Chris Pratt Mario movie. I like the movie from the 90s, or was it in the 80s? The weird Mario movie that people,
I think it was 93, yeah.
They try to push that away. I think it's good. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, probably, so I know it's technically bad, but I can remember watching that more than once.
It's weird. I watched it probably about 10 years ago, and it's fun. It's got a cool vibe to it. It's what?
Yeah, it's definitely not for kids.
No, I mean, really, so many movies that we watched when we were kids weren't for kids.
It felt like more like Demolition Man than Mario.
Yeah, but dude, I will say, okay, I'm so glad you brought up the Sonic, the adjustment of the character. You know how they changed, from the original trailer, how they were bullied into changing it. Mm-hmm. I've got a hot take on that, and I feel like I do this like almost once an episode where it's almost political, and I'm just gonna say this, dude. It pissed me off that they did that, and now I do love that it was changed. I love that these people were passionate. Better. Yeah, it is way better, and I love that these people were passionate. But anytime someone says something like, oh, one person not eating at Chick-fil-A, for example, won't change anything. Or, one vote. Bro, if you guys can be passionate enough to get them to change the Sonic CGI for a fucking movie, you can be passionate enough to change something in this world. Like, don't direct all your energy to just Sonic. You have that power now to change something. Do it. Like, don't direct it just at video game movies. Let's do something. We know we can do it now. Let's band together and actually do something real.
Yeah. And you want to know, maybe that is our answer? Sega did that. Sega brought the power of the people and woke us all up, and Nintendo didn't.
Yeah, Sega's woke.
Nintendo said stay asleep and spend $60 on these games that we've been re-releasing. No, so yeah. I guess we may. Like I said, I thought this might be a hot topic, and there's way more we could keep talking about. But I guess for this episode, which system would you say? Because you've had both, but I have as well.
I honestly prefer the Super Nintendo. I mean, there is enough of a lasting impact on me with Mario, and like I said, Mario games are comfort games for me. Super Mario World, which is a Super Nintendo game, and Donkey Kong Country that I can still play to this day. Sonic, I do sometimes, but there's such a catalog on Super Nintendo that and honestly, Nintendo to me is so precious that I'm gonna roll Super Nintendo on this one.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with Sega, and it's not because of the games. It's because Sega came out in 1989 and was already doing what the Super Nintendo. They had to catch up to Sega even when their new system came out 2 years later. So while they didn't have the games, they had the technology, they had the blast processing, the FM synthesis. I love the music. And I find myself having more fun exploring the catalogs of Sega games because it's just unique. They had more, like we said, Nintendo had the blinders or the quality control, where Sega was just popping stuff out. So they lost the war. It's all, they're the WCW of this era. They lost no matter how cool it was, but I can always say that I appreciate I don't know. I just enjoyed it so much that I'm not gonna just say Super Nintendo. But I do. I love the Super Nintendo, and if you were to ask me to buy a system right now, I would go with the Super Nintendo just because I knew I'm gonna have good games. It's not I don't have to search for them, like I just said. That to me was a plus. But if you're a consumer, you knew, and this is still true today, you knew Nintendo stuff is gonna be quality and not bad for your kids. You don't have to hack in and do any special things. It's clean. It works. There's no updates or weirdness. Everything's clean.
I agree.
Right
I love
on.
it.
Well, this has been an interesting episode, and that sounds terrible. It's not been It's been interesting, but it's also been fun because these two systems have been so special. Sounds like to both of us, and it was the spark of like a lifelong relationship with video games. These companies had two or three other generations of battles on different consoles, all the way up to the Dreamcast and the 64. No, that was Dreamcast and GameCube. Either way, they were still competing with each other, and I appreciate both companies, and I love both of them. And you know who I love more? The people out there that are listening to us in this show. Thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate you, and we see the numbers. And also now I noticed that there's comments. You can leave comments underneath our episodes. So please let us know if you have anything that jumps out at you that you remember, or something that you'd like to add to this episode. Please do, and we will definitely write you back. Hope you have a great week, and remember something.